If you allow me just a moment of national pride, as you know, the UK has been the source of many inventions and best practice in the mining industry for decades, and continues to host world-class universities and institutions, including the Institute of Mining, the London Metal Exchange, Women in Mining, to name just a few. The UK is also home to the head offices of the International Council of Metals and Minerals, who've led this journey towards better practice across many areas, most recently in the management of tailings. And London is a base to 3 of the world's 5 largest mining companies. And we're delighted that 2 of them, Anglo American and Rio Tinto, will be presenting today. And the third one, BHP, will be represented in the closing words delivered by Peter Lynch. So thank you to all of you for participating. The organisations presenting today operate across the globe and are clearly very aware of what the challenges are. So it would be really interesting to hear your perspectives. So some of the problems that I understand that they've been thinking on include world-class solutions to problems such as how to use less water in operations, how to maximise use of energy, how do we reduce the inevitable human footprint of activities. A lot of progress has already been made in these areas, but we know that there is more to come. So thanks again to today's speakers for sharing your thoughts on the journey to where we've got to, but really to where we hope to be in sort of 30 to 50 years hence. Coming back to the UK, as many as you know, we ourselves have had a major journey from the days in which we mined and used our rich coal deposits, which of course fueled the Industrial Revolution in our country, to today, this completely different world in which safety, security, care of the environment is quite rightly paramount to operations and to policies. This experience, this national experience, helps inform our best practice and allows us to help develop and respond to new circumstances. We're very happy to be able to share with you today some of our best sort of experiences and ideas that are being developed both within and for the industry, in the hope that they will stimulate further thoughts and that when deployed, wherever they are in the world, they will help increase the benefits of using these important resources for everyone, and whilst limiting to the minimum the impact on the environment. And I say that in particular, mindful that the UK will be hosting the very important COP26 summit at the end of this year in Glasgow, where we hope to secure the commitment of many nations to ensuring a cleaner world. Before ending, I'd just like to go back to you, Lennon, and thank you, and in your name, the Inter-American Development Bank, who have since 1959, I believe, consistently supported progress across the region. Lennon, you've very kindly accepted the invitation to be a moderator today and to lead the Q&A session at the end of the conference. So I'll stop there. I hope I've managed to convey something of my enthusiasm for today's event. And so with no further ado, let me pass back the mic to Lennon and we can start proceedings. Thanks everyone.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you so much for the kind words, not only to myself, but to the organizations where I belong and to the mining industry in general. Let me go then to the agenda. We're gonna have back sessions with a terrific lineup of speakers. So let me go straight to the first one. Rob Lawan, President and CEO of the International Council on Mining and Metals. Rob was appointed CEO in April 2021. He is passionate about the transformative power of mining, particularly in emerging markets, where he has spent 2/3 of his life. His career has been at the intersection of sustainability, resources, and geopolitics. And his prior role has included Managing Director for Energy, Climate, and Resources at Eurasia Group and Global Head of Sustainability for the mining sector at KPMG. Rod is a fellow and faculty member of the Africa Leadership Initiative and a Resena Fellow at the Asian Forum on global governance and member of the advisory board of Concordia, among other things. He holds a Master of Science in Environmental Change and Management from the University of Oxford in the UK. Rob, the floor is yours.
Lennon, thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be with you today. As my slides appear, Elizabeth, I never thought I would say this sitting here in London, but if you would like some sun, please come back to the UK, because we are having a scorcher of a week of summer. Colleagues who are maybe in Latin America may not believe me, but I'm looking out my window to a very, very warm July afternoon. I wish I was with you in person, but these are, of course, the times we live in. So allow me, please, to share with you over the next 10 minutes or so my views on the mining of the future. I will start just by introducing ICMM for those who may not have interacted with our organization before. And if we move on to the next slide, it is a summary of what ICMM is. As Elizabeth mentioned, we are headquartered in London and have been since our inception in 2002, when a group of 6 large mining companies came together to create a voluntary organization that was aimed at raising the standards of social and environmental performance of the mining industry. They did it because the industry was at a time of crisis, having come out of a series of disasters in the 1990s, and recognized that achieving and maintaining a social license to operate required collective action on behalf of the industry to constantly raise the standards of social and environmental performance. So although you may not be able to tell from the name ICMM, what we stand for, and really the only thing we stand for, is improved sustainability performance of the mining sector. We are not a trade body in the way you may have other trade bodies for other sectors, but a very unique thing in the mining sector to have an industry-led leadership organization that is always aiming higher when it comes to sustainability performance. And the core of what we do is captured in that right-hand column, which is a set of mining principles that we have had since 2002, which essentially set out what good performance looks like, and very clearly the expectations we have of our 28 members, and indeed the wider industry, for what counts as high performance in sustainability. So if we move to the next slide, you will see who these 28 members are. And I'm very proud, of course, of the fact that we have strong representation from the Latin American region in our membership. Many of these companies will be familiar to you. And of course, the 3 that Elizabeth mentioned, Anglo American, Rio Tinto, and BHP, are all dearly cherished members of ICMM, and you see the full list here. I should also mention that in addition to these 28 companies that together represent 1/3 of global metals and mineral production across 650 sites in over 50 countries, we also have 35 mining associations as members, and I'm pleased to see some of those joining the event today. And through them, we reach an even greater audience through our work. So really what you see on the slide in front of you now is the first of 3 projects I wanted to talk about that we are involved in as ICMM, which I think capture quite neatly the bookends or the boundaries of where I think mining in the future will be. There may be others, but I chose these 3 because I felt that they talk about the issues that the industry is working on and will need to continue to work on if it is indeed to build the mine of the future. The first of these, I will go through each of them in short detail. The first of them is the Innovation for Cleaner, Safer Vehicles, or ICSV for short. Now, the ICSV program was set up in 2018 to solve a quite simple but still very complex problem, which was how can we close the gap between mining companies and providers of equipment that was preventing low emission, safe equipment from being widely deployed across the industry. And what was happening was mining companies saying, well, we would buy low emission, safe equipment if we knew that the suppliers could provide them. And the suppliers saying, well, we would develop and provide them if we knew you would buy them. So we as ICMM brought together our 28 members together with 19 mobile equipment manufacturers at a CEO level to set 3 goals for ourselves. First, to introduce greenhouse gas emissions-free surface mining vehicles by 2040 or earlier. Second, to minimize the operational impact of diesel exhaust emissions by 2025. Many of you will be aware, of course, that diesel fumes still cause health impacts across a range of work settings, including mines. And finally, to make collision avoidance technology available to mining companies also by 2025, because sadly, as we saw in this year's safety report from ICMM, the collisions with mobile equipment are the second highest cause of fatalities across ICMM member companies. And we want to work very hard to stop that happening. So I'm very proud that in the last 3 years, across these 3 goals, we have assessed over 300 fleets around the world for their readiness to adopt these technologies as quickly as possible. And we are now moving into the next phase of work that will ensure that we are able to execute on these 3 goals as quickly as we can. So if I was to summarize that, I would say the future of mining is greenhouse gas free, no diesel particulate emissions, and nobody losing their life as a result of colliding with mobile equipment. The second project I want to briefly talk about is our Skills for Common Future. This is a 15-year project that is currently underway to build the skills in our communities in mining to enable people in those communities to have a brighter future. Now, that future may be while a mine is still operating, or indeed, it may be after a mine has left because its resource has been extracted. And we believe that a skills project cannot simply focus only on the workforce, only when the mine functions, because it must take into account the life cycle of a community over its entire period, rather than just while the mine operates. The other thing we're very conscious of is that any attempt to build skills will need to take into account broader changes happening in the external environment. And that is what you see here around particularly the impact of climate change, as well as technology advances, which will change the opportunities and risks available to community members. So this program of work has once again delivered excellent results in its first few years, helping mining companies around the world develop programs that help communities build the skills they will require for the next 10 to 20 years when mining could look very different. And of course, in that, we also pay particular attention to the issues of diversity and inclusion. And here I must say that the mining industry has lagged, unfortunately, other sectors with better representation of women in the workforce. I'm very proud to say that we at ICMM are not at all representative of the industry in this regard, because nearly 80% of our workforce is women, but sadly that is not replicated across the industry. So a lot of focus on diversity and inclusion, and finally, a lot of focus on the impact of technology on jobs. So if I was to summarize this slide, I would say to you that mining of the future will be one in which people who either work in the industry or live or operate close to a mine will feel that they have the skills to cope with a changing future. My final slide and the final project I want to briefly mention to talk about what I think will be the future of the mining industry is on tailings management. Elizabeth mentioned that this is one area of work that has been a priority for ICMM and our member companies over the last 2 years since the tragic dam collapse in Brumadinho in 2019. Now, many of you will be familiar that the industry came together with UNEP and with PRI, the Principles for Responsible Investment, to develop a global industry standard on tailings management. Following that, we also released earlier this year a set of conformance protocols to help companies, both ICMM member companies, as well as the wider industry, adopt those standards consistently. And we think that that marks a really important step forward to make sure that the existing tailings facilities, of which we have around 3,000 around the world currently in operation, and potentially up to 10 times that much if you include sites that are no longer operational, all those sites will be better managed. But if I look 15 years into the future or 20 years into the future, which is the subject of today's webinar, I hope if we were to meet again in 15 years, I could say to you that we have achieved our aspirational goal of eliminating tailings in 15 years' time. If that sounds like a very ambitious goal, it is a very ambitious goal, but we think it is absolutely necessary that while we continue to work on improving the management and safety of current tailings facilities, we must work on eliminating tailings completely through precision mining, through precision geology, through precision sorting, and other forms of technology-enabled change that would allow us to mine without generating significant tailings. And that is the big goal we set for ourselves. So if I summarize this slide, I think that the future of mining is one where there are no tailings. So Lennon, I will stop there. I hope that those three projects, one on the innovation for cleaner, safer vehicles, the second on the skills for our common future, and the third on tailings, give some indication to how we see mining for the future.
Thank you, Rod. Fantastic presentation. I'm sure that already many of my colleagues and participants already have questions for you. Just to be on the safe side, there is a group chat. You can put your questions. We are going to have a Q&A at the end of the third panelist. So please, everyone, feel free to start to put your questions there. We are going to get them together right at the end. Thank you, Rob. Before I move to the second panelist, I just want to highlight that, and just to be on the safe side, we have simultaneous translation, just in case you haven't realized that. I'm going to switch to Spanish just for a second, just to make sure that everyone understands that. Tenemos traducción simultánea. Hay un icono en la parte inferior que pueden seleccionar para obtener la traducción en caso así lo necesiten. So I'm going to switch back to English again, just to introduce our second speaker of the day, Christina Bruce. Christina is the head of international relations at Anglo-American, a global diversified mining company with operations in Southern Africa, South America, and Australia. Her role has involved the management of political risk, international stakeholder engagement, development of the government relations functions, and the incorporation of public policy issues and trends into the company, such as the future of work. Christina joined Anglo-America in March 2012, and she has a master's degree in international relations from the London School of Economics. Christina, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Len. Hello, everybody. And thank you for this invitation to share how we envisage mining in the future at Anglo-American. And I'll do that by focusing primarily on our innovation program, which we call Future Smart Mining. As we go into the next slide, just a brief introduction. Yes, we are a global diversified mining company based in London. We mine copper, platinum, iron ore, nickel, diamonds, and coal. Although we are at final stages of transitioning out of our thermal coal business. We have operations in Australia, Canada, Southern Africa, and then most pertinently for this presentation, across Latin America, Brazil, Chile, Peru, Colombia, and then we have an exploration office in Ecuador. Our purpose is to reimagine mining to improve people's lives. So what does that mean? It means that we need to think very differently about mining and our value chain to ensure that it has a positive impact on people's lives going forward. If we move on to the next slide. Our strategy rests on portfolio, innovation, and our people. What we're experiencing at the moment is a fundamental transformation in our industry, which is driven by climate change, as already been mentioned, by innovation, and by significantly changing societal expectations about the role of our industry. So we are leading changes across our value chain, We're looking at how we mine, how we move, how we process, how we market our metals in order to create sustainable value. So Future Smart Mining is our innovation-led pathway to sustainable mining, technology, digitalization, and sustainability working hand in hand. We recognize that change can bring huge opportunity, but it can also trigger concerns. Change is very often not comfortable. And so we've committed to guide our work in this area by 5 principles. We're committed to listening to our stakeholders, collaborating with partners, being transparent, investing in the future of our people and our host communities, and being guided, as I've mentioned, at all times by our purpose. So next slide. Mining over the past 100 years has been on what's fundamentally an unsustainable trajectory. So to produce a unit of copper today compared to 100 years ago, we need to use 16 times the amount of energy, move 24 times the amount of waste, and use twice the amount of water. We've, as an industry, solved this problem by scale. It's not a coincidence that when you ask people about mining, the first thing they usually talk about is the size of the trucks. It's that image that everyone is so familiar with. Scale is just no longer sustainable as a solution, and neither is it acceptable. If we go to the next slide. So Future Smart Mining is comprised of 4 different areas. First, we have concentrating the mine, which looks at increasing precision so that we can home in on our desired materials and avoid a lot of that waste that I was referring to. 75% of our mines are in water distressed areas, and that will only increase as we suffer the consequences of climate change. And therefore, we need to reduce our dependence on water and, of course, the wet tailings that Ro was referring to. With regards to the modern mine, it's our efforts to use technology to increase safety and to enhance productivity. And then when we refer to the intelligent mine, it is innovations where we aim to use digitalization and clean data to enhance decision-making. So I'm just going to go through one example of each of these. Bulk ore sorting is a technology that we are developing where we sort rock as early as possible, so before it's processed, into low value and high value material. The aim there is to eliminate the waste rock and therefore avoid spending energy on that less valuable rock and focusing in on the higher valuable material. The benefits of this is that we're going to reduce energy and water intensity. We have a lower cutoff grade in the material that we're processing. We're ultimately increasing our life of mine, and we're increasing the grade processed by 7 to 10%. We've got demonstration plants operating in Brazil, Chile, and South Africa. And we have a full-scale unit in Chile. If we move on to the next one. Coarse particle recovery. It uses and recovers minerals of a larger particle size than conventional technologies. So the image to have in your mind is that it is easier to process and drain water from sand than it is to drain water from mud. So we're using a larger particle size to use, therefore, less energy and ultimately be able to recover a significantly more amount of water from the processing process. When used with hydraulic dry stacking, which is a technology I won't talk about in detail, but it is the dry tailings technology that we are developing, we will hopefully be looking at an 85% water recovery. We're going to be using 20% less energy. As I say, produce 20% less wet tailings, increase our throughput, and ultimately increase production. We've got 2 units under construction in Chile and South Africa, and we have units planned for Brazil, Chile, and Peru. Next slide, please. Thank you. So modern mining, it's the use of new technologies, as I said, to increase safety and increase productivity. This is a picture of the autonomous haulage system that we are introducing at Quellaveco, which is the copper mine that is nearing completion of construction in Peru. It has already had successful trials. We have a range of skills programs in place to capacitate colleagues appropriately so that this technology can be used. Ultimately, this will increase efficiency and reduce maintenance costs. Moving on to the intelligent mine. We've recently launched in Chile the IROC, which is the Integrated Remote Operating Center for Los Bronces. And basically what this involves is through a digital twin, we are running the systems that operate Los Bronces, which is in the Cordillera outside Santiago, from our offices in Santiago in the Torre Titanio. So that was launched a few months ago. So I hope that gives you a flavor for the 4 different areas and some of the technologies that we are considering. Next slide, please. Another very important area for Anglo-American, as we are the world's largest platinum producer, is that we are investing heavily in supporting the hydrogen economy, particularly relevant for Latin America, as Latin America has such strong potential in renewables and therefore in the production of green hydrogen. We are developing the first hydrogen operated mining haul truck, and that aims to be trialed and operating in South Africa by the end of this year and operational in Chile in 2 years. This will eliminate the use of diesel and therefore significantly move us towards our goal of being carbon neutral by 2040. It is very much linked to the initiative that Ro was referring to earlier as well. Next slide, please. So what could this look like altogether? So this just focuses in on our operations in Chile. So our journey has already begun. So we have the world's first photovoltaic solar plant operating at Las Tortolas tailings dam. We have 100% renewable energy supply in Chile. And after a recent agreement, it means that we will have a renewable energy supply across Latin America by 2022, end of next year. We aim to have the first hydrogen-powered mining truck in Latin America in the next couple of years. We will have the first particle flotation plant at El Soldado, one of our mines in Chile, bulk ore sorting at Los Bronces, which I've referred to. We have electric buses moving our colleagues to and fro work. Microwave technology, which is a technology that also contributes to the pre-sorting of material. And then we have recently launched the IROC. Next slide, please. What will this look like if all these technologies are introduced simultaneously? We can look at water reduction of 50%, water recovery of greater than 85%, energy reduction of 30 to 50%, 100% elimination of diesel, 100% use of green energy. We can better manage our plants, increase efficiently in construction and design, increase our grades, and of course, increase throughput. Next slide, please. I focused very much on new technologies, and I did want to dwell on the second part of our innovation program, which is our sustainable mining plan. Now, this is 9 stretch goals that focus in on E, maintaining a healthy environment, S, building thriving communities, and G, developing trust as a corporate leader. Each one of these has 3 detailed goals. For example, under developing trust as a corporate leader, we have an ethical values chain goal, which aims to, by 2025, have all of Anglo-American operations third-party audited against a recognized mining certification system. An example under thriving communities is our livelihoods goal. So we aim to create and support 5 jobs off-site for every job on-site by 2030 across all of our mines. And when it comes to healthy environment, again, I've mentioned we're committed to be carbon neutral across our business by 2040, but with a significant percentage achieved by 2030. These 9 goals are supported by areas of activity which we refer to as the critical foundations: human rights, inclusion and diversity that Ro referred to, of course, compliance with legal requirements, and zero harm. Each one of our sites is required to produce a 5-year plan to show how it's going to achieve these goals. And then all the goals in the sustainable mining plan, but in particular, the one around livelihoods that I have mentioned, are underpinned by an initiative which we call collaborative regional development. This is a program which we will develop in each country that we operate in. And what it aims to do is it aims to bring together cross-sectoral partners, so governmental, civil society, and also other industries, to use spatial planning in order to identify what are the future potential industries of a region, and therefore bring everybody to work together independently of the mine to create jobs that will then take communities into their future beyond the life of mine. So I hope that that has given you a bit of a feel for where we are headed, what future smart mining means. Again, our purpose is to respond to the transformations that are happening in the world around us. Most importantly, respond to societal expectation, and to transform our sustainability footprint to create value. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. And by the way, I just learned that you are half Venezuelan, so it's great to know that I'm not alone here.
Are you half Venezuelan too?
No, I'm a full Venezuelan.
Oh, full.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we'll have to talk later, but continue. Pleasure to meet you.
Thank you, Christina. I'll get back to you during the Q&A. Last but not least, we have Kevin. Kevin, are you around?
I am. Hello, Lennon. Hello, everyone. Thank you.
Hi, Kevin. How are you? Well, let me introduce Kevin before he jumps in. Kevin Fox joined the newly formed Rio Tinto Ventures in February 2017 as managing director. Rio Tinto M&A and Ventures, and he's responsible for the sourcing, review, and evaluation of investment opportunities across a wide range of commodities. Now repositioning as Rio Tinto M&A and Ventures, the team is focused on evaluation of opportunities in commodities of the future, as well as creating value-adding opportunities in existing Rio Tinto businesses such as copper. Kevin has had a long career in exploration and project evaluation and development with Rio Tinto, having spent more than 18 years in multi-commodity exploration programs. Kevin is graduated from Trinity College and has a master's degree from Imperial College London. Kevin, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Lennon, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you all today. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you, Kevin.
Great. So following on from the previous speakers, one of the things I'm struck by is the degree of commonality, the challenges that we all face. And it probably won't surprise you that I will touch on very similar themes during the course of my presentation, and the sort of approaches from a technological perspective that Rio Tinto is taking in order to address the societal challenges we face, the climate change challenges, as well as the energy transition. And I wanted to introduce the discussion today by giving you a look at some of the approaches we're taking in our energy transition. This is our WEPA operation in Queensland, and it just shows there the scale of, in this case, the solar array we're installing there as part of our move to a greener energy transition. I think as well as talking about the challenges that we face in the industry, one of the things I would like to draw attention to is the opportunities we have as well as an industry, because part of what I have seen certainly over the last 40 years I've been in the industry is the ups and downs in terms of supply and demand, and in particular how that influences the prices for our products and as a result the impact it has on our business. But I have rarely seen such a demand wave coming at us, in particular in the context of energy minerals, or battery minerals as we often call them, and I would include copper in that, and the opportunity that provides for us to be able to supply what are such critical commodities to solve some of those issues we face. I think in saying that, though, we recognize that there are some significant challenges we face. I've summarized some of them here. I do want to talk to the safety aspect, because I think, as the ICMM speaker mentioned, some of the most serious issues we have to face in the industry relate to keeping our people safe. The initiative around driving is one of the key focus areas for Rio Tinto, because, as was mentioned, it is unfortunately the case that interactions between large vehicles and smaller ones is one of the key areas that we have suffered loss of life and injury. The tailings initiative, of course, has become a huge feature in our industry in light of recent events, but it has been for an awful long time. And I think one of the drivers for where we want to go is not only tailings management done better, but as was suggested, ultimately the goal of eliminating tailings. That's a very difficult thing to do, of course. But in response to the question around, what else can we do? I would certainly put out there, for example, some of the initiatives we are pursuing in paste fill. In other words, putting the tailings back underground rather than storing them on surface. And I've recently had the opportunity to see some initiatives in that space, which are really quite impressive in terms of dealing with that issue. Reducing carbon footprint, of course, is a key element of what we're looking to do. And as I said, the initiatives around greening our energy supply, like the other speakers, is a very significant focus of activity and initiative in Rio Tinto. The other point that I'd like to draw attention to here is the question of how do we get better at finding ore bodies? Because, of course, if we don't have successful exploration, we don't have an industry going forward. And I think it's unfortunately the case that in almost all of our commodities, and in particular copper, declining grades at our assets is one of the things we have to deal with. So therefore, the question is, how do we get better at finding ore bodies? How do we maximize the extraction of value from them and develop and improve the performance of our equipment so that every ton of ore gives more value, not just to ourselves, but to society in general? Next slide, please. I'll make no excuses for, as a geologist, talking about the importance of exploration, but I did want to just reinforce the point I made, that for us, certainly, better exploration, quicker time to discovery and development, and ultimately production, is a key focus of our exploration activities right across the world. We explore in more than 20 countries around the world, and our objective is to be more successful in discovery, but as I said, shorten the time from discovery to production. Those of you who've been involved in the copper exploration industry know that the average time taken from discovery to production is over 20 years. That is obviously a very significant challenge for the industry, and one that we have to improve upon. Part of the challenge in the timing of that comes from the amount of effort and cost that we have to invest in resource evaluation. So a lot of the push we are developing now is to develop a risk tolerance aligned with resource uncertainty. In other words, do enough drilling to be comfortable about the resource we have and put it into production, but not spend years and years drilling out an ore body that costs an enormous amount of money and in particular time. The fourth point there is getting maximum value from the ore body. So our ore body knowledge understanding is something we put a lot of effort into, such that we can maximize both the mining and especially the processing of those ore bodies to make them as productive as possible. And the last point I'd like to draw attention to here is the importance of technology transfer and value preservation. And what I mean by that is application of technologies that we develop in one part of the world. We want to use that in every other part of the world in which we operate, both our operational activities and also our exploration activities. Next slide, please. That's the one. So just to reinforce the point that innovation has been part of Rio Tinto's life ever since we started in Spain in 1873. And some of the initiatives we've pursued and some of the advances in the mining industry are shown on the slide there. And we all know, for example, that the move from high-grade, generally underground copper mines to large-scale open-pit porphyry coppers has required us to innovate in a way that allows us to deal with, as I said, much lower grades. But some of the other initiatives that Rio Tinto has been involved in, and in some cases driven forward, has been in, for example, the iron ore industry, most especially in Australia, where automation and development of not just autonomous trucks and locomotives, but also now drills as well, has allowed us to significantly reduce our exposure from a point of view of safety, but also maximizing efficiencies in our iron ore operations. The point about developing the new flow sheets, I think, is key to really improving the recovery proposition that I mentioned. And the sulfide heap leach initiatives that we are pursuing are designed to better extract value from some of the more difficult ore bodies in terms of treatment. Like Anglo-American, we are pursuing ore sorting initiatives as well to better utilize the ore bodies. And in the case of our aluminium business, of course, a lot of the effort in that is aimed at reducing our carbon footprint, but also maximizing the development and recovery of the aluminium smelting operation in the business. Thank you for that. If you could jump forward then to the next couple of slides and I'll resume the story. Yeah, that one. So in terms of, you know, where we're going with operations, well, electrification and automation, as I mentioned, operating centers. We've had a remote operating center in Perth since 2010, and it controls a large part of our iron ore operations now in the Pilbara in Western Australia. That is something we're looking to replicate with our other operations, not least in terms of our copper businesses, but also the aluminium businesses. And this emphasis on reducing tailings, as I said, one of the things that we're looking to do is decreasing the amount of water usage in our tailings processing, but also the paste fill initiative that I mentioned, i.e. putting the tailings from the operation back underground. And that is something we are pursuing in our new Jadar lithium project in Serbia. The operations center not only control the operations, but also the movement of the materials from the mines to the, in this case, ports in the case of Western Australia, but elsewhere in the world to other destinations for our production. So right across the value chain of the mining industry, there are initiatives that we were pursuing to improve access to, extraction of, processing of, and transportation of our products. Next slide, please. And at the end, the closure of the operations, and it's inevitable that at some point in an operation's life, it does come to the closure stage. And in our case, the vision we have, which we're putting forward for 2040 here, has 5 to 6 significant components of improvement in how we manage and close our operations. Firstly, the distinction between mineral and non-mineral waste. And providing better handling and remediation of wastes, but also separation of that from the mineral and non-mineral waste. The wastewater initiative is to really focus on using less water and avoiding groundwater contamination, which of course is one of the most significant challenges we face, not just in water stressed areas, but in any area where we have additional requirements for water usage, such as agriculture and communities, etc. And the third is the area of earth moving and land farming, and looking at better ways of land farming and reformation of sites using, for example, in this case, better 3D definition of land farms, and looking to maximize how we reconfigure those to best obtain a solution. The fourth initiative is on restoring and repurposing, and that is really a focus on what else can we do with our rehabilitated sites for closure. There are several initiatives we're looking at in terms of green energy as an alternative to having essentially barren sites, and the location of solar panel arrays and wind farms, for example, is one of the initiatives we're pursuing in that regard in some of our operations that are at or moving toward closure. I think one of the key lessons we have learned in developing this different approach to closure is the recognition of the need to start planning for closure at the same time as when the mine opens. And that might seem extreme in some cases where we have mine lives of more than 50 years. But by doing that and integrating that approach into the planning for the mine, it significantly improves the chances of a best case outcome in terms of the other four initiatives that I was talking about. And laterally in terms of, what demolition practices have to be put in place, we're looking at how better ways of carrying out demolition can be integrated into the final plans for closure. Next slide, please. So we have several initiatives going at the moment, and we are very keen to expand some of those into and broaden our linkages in South America. Some of the most relevant initiatives we have going currently are summarized on the slide here in terms of our Pioneer portal, where we are looking to get answers to some of the challenges we post externally on key areas of focus for us. It's been a very successful initiative so far. We're very keen to expand that. The green tech initiatives, which include some of the collaboration agreements we have with companies in the area of some of the most significant challenges. For example, green steel, which is an industry, is a very large one for the iron ore and the steel industry, has also attracted a lot of interest, and we are discussing with several groups how we expand that to better approach the challenges that the steel industry faces. And the third one, in terms of our technology centre, which is in Bundoora in Australia, it's to provide targeted support for startups that are relevant to some of the initiatives we're pursuing. It's called the Pioneer Accelerator, and it's to give access to some of the most encouraging and interesting looking initiatives that are in need of support, both in terms of capability and finance, to build relationships, lever expertise, and work together to develop solutions for the initiatives that are aimed at solving some of the challenges we face. Next slide, please. I'll just move on to the next one, please. Just to talk to some of the learnings that go back quite a long way in terms of the history of, in this case, one of our most long-lived operations, which is Kennecott in the United States. And this is just to demonstrate the reality of declining head grades, which is the black line on the slide there, but also that the improvements in technology and the application of those that we have talked to and implemented, in this case at Kennecott, has managed to maintain our recovery of copper, all the while the grade of the ore body has been decreasing. And I use that as an illustration both of the successes that can be derived from the application of technology, but also to demonstrate that ore body lives and their extension and maximizing of the value from them has to be one of the key drivers for the application of technology and improving our efforts in the industry to maximize the value both for our shareholders, communities, and societies at large. Thank you very much. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you so much for your presentation. I want to call back Christina and Ralph so we can do Q&A all together at the same time. I promise to be as kindly as possible with all the questions and refer to each point. But I'm sorry that I think I have another platform open that is bothering me. Okay, so Christina, are you there as well? Okay, good, fantastic. So I think that we already have a lot of questions, and thank you everyone for writing those in the group chat. Since I am the moderator, I'm gonna take the opportunity to ask one question. Please feel free just to respond, whoever think, or it could be each of you. And I'm just thinking overall. I mean, at the end of the day, the name of this session, this session was the future of mining, and all of you talk about how how the mining industry is going to look like in the future, and some of you already mentioned that the future is already here. But when we talk about the future, it looks like it is something very abstract, and it is undefined, right? Many aspects and dimension, it's like, yeah, we're going to do this in the future. But if you could expand a little bit about exactly what the future means for you, at least in the most important areas that you already discussed, I would really appreciate it. So whoever wants to go, it's up to you.
Very, very happy to go first. Can you hear me? Yes, apologies if you can hear my baby. I have a baby who is going absolutely crazy in the background. So sorry about that. I think, so, I mean, that's why I tried in my slides to show pictures. A lot of the technologies that I mentioned are already real, but they're not real in that they are established technologies that are at every one of our operations. And 5 years ago, these were ideas. And so it is a journey. But if you want that vision, which I think is what your question is driving at, it is a vision where we have transformed our industry, both the processes that we employ and what our mines actually look like and the impact that we have, so that we are responding and satisfying to people's expectations and creating holistic value. What does that look like? That would look like smaller mines, so mines with a smaller geographical footprint, mines that use less energy, less water, all the kind of facts and figures that I tried to mention. Mines that have an improved trust and relationship with our host communities. As an industry, we've invested a huge amount, and we need to keep doing that. By investing, I don't mean money. I mean listening, energy, relationship building, and that process needs to continue, because ultimately, mines I would, agree with Kevin, 20 years to get from discovery to production, but then your life of mines end. They last for a very long time, but they end. And so we need to prepare for what our communities and host governments are going to experience once the mine is closed. So that's going really into the future. And it's why we're focusing on job creation, on alternative industries, and on that long-term impact that we're going to have.
Lennon, maybe I'll just go back to one of the points that I made during the course of the presentation, and it's to do with the energy transition. I think as an industry, we have a tremendous opportunity here to facilitate that energy transition. It's going to require an enormous increase in the supply of not just lithium, nickel, cobalt, but copper as well. And I think if we could be seen to be the facilitator of that energy transition with all of the benefits that it brings in terms of, reducing reliance on fossil fuels, that would be an enormous opportunity for us to, perhaps just aligning with what Christina is mentioning there, improving the perception society has of us as an industry and facilitating a significant benefit in the climate challenges that we all face. So, from my perspective, that would be one area where we could be seen to be significantly assisting a challenge that the whole planet faces.
Lennon, I would just say from my point of view, the one word that summarizes what I think the future means to us as an industry, it would be collaboration. And it's interesting looking at the questions coming through, because so many of them are about how suppliers and companies can work better together and how to share knowledge and experience. And what we've learned over the last 20 years we've been doing this, Lennon, is that when the industry acts collectively, it can achieve a lot that individually it may not be able to. And we've done, I think, a good job of coming together as an industry. As I say, we bring together 28, but through the associations, another 1,500 companies. What I think we haven't done as good a job of, and the responsibility lies as much on the industry as it does on others, is work with partners outside of the industry. And if I can be honest, Lennon, I think sometimes there's been a feeling of mistrust on both sides, for example, between civil society partners, multilaterals, and the industry. And if we don't fix that mistrust, we leave many opportunities to collaborate on the table. And so my group and I are laser focused to try and build as many opportunities where everybody feels safe coming to the table, having an open discussion about the challenges we face, and finding solutions together.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you all. Rob, let me stay with you for a second. And I saw that you already answered one of the questions in the group chat. But if you can expand a little bit, and then I will move to Christina as well with the same question and another one. If the objective of mining is to completely eliminate tailing, when do you think it will happen? You already provide a time frame, but if you can expand on that, that would be great.
Lennon, sure. Look, the time frame we have set for ourselves is 15 years to eliminate or significantly reduce tailings. If that sounds ambitious, it's because we are ambitious. And, we've shown as an industry that when we set ourselves a big goal and work together, we can get there. And in the short term, there are other important timelines, the most important of which is the next 3 years and the next 5 years. Now, why do I say that? Because in the next 3 years, we have committed to ensuring that all tailings facilities with the highest potential risk are in compliance with the new tailings standard, and all other facilities in the next 5 years. So Lennon, I would say all our focus and attention right now should be on making sure that in the next 3 years and 5 years, we achieve those milestones, because that will ensure that existing facilities are operated as safely as possible, and then shift our attention. I mean, there is work we are already doing across the 5 dimensions that I put in the chat for people that are watching that. 5 dimensions of work on eliminating or significantly reducing tailings. So that's going to happen in parallel and will substantially increase once we are already in conformance with the short-term timeline. So that's what I would say. 3 years, 5 years, 15 years is the way we think about the timelines.
Christina, if you don't mind, I think that a similar question was directed to you as well. If you would like to comment on that, and also on how to save water consumption at concentrators. If you mind expanding a little bit on that and commenting on that, I would appreciate it.
I'll do the easy one first, which is saving water on concentrators. I'm afraid I don't know the answer. But please, I can find out and I'll send a reply, Lennon, through you. So apologies there. On tailings, I think that a couple of points to make. Oh, the crying is really loud now. I apologize. A couple of points to make. I think firstly, Rose alluded to, we have the tailings that are being created now and the tailings of the future and legacy tailings. And it's really important to distinguish between those. When it comes to legacy tailings as an industry, we're all going to have to, really address the challenge in conjunction with a whole range of other stakeholders. At Angle, we are looking at a technology called novel leach, which will try to deal with legacy tailings and reduce some of the risks there. When it comes to current and future tailings, the design of tailings, it depends on the geology and the design of a specific mine. But the technology that we are looking at and developing, we call hydraulic dry stack. So the way I understand it, being a non-engineer, is I was referring to sand and mud. If you imagine that you pour water over sand or you pour water over talcum powder, the talcum powder becomes a thick, gloopy thing that then is very difficult to get the water out of. Whereas if you put water over sand, the water trickles through the particles of sand. So the idea is that when you combine coarse particle recovery, which is the way of getting the metal out of a slightly larger particle size, with a technology that will be able to fling sand into banks of dry material, which is what we call hydraulic dry stacking, you will end up with geologically stable earth that then over time can be terraformed and be geotechnically stable, but also ultimately contribute to biodiversity. So it's a new technology combined with the other one to hugely reduce the amount of water. And then, of course, you can have dry stacks of material.
Fantastic, Christina. Thank you. Thanks a lot. And no worries about the other question. I know that it was a very difficult question.
Oh, no. I'm happy to find out. I'll get back to you.
Fantastic. That's the beauty of virtual stuff, that at the end of the day, we can just get back to each other and get an answer. Thank you, Christina. I'll promise to get back to you in a second. Kevin, now's your time here. Taking into account, and I'm just gonna read what I got. Taking into account the difficulties of developing new copper projects, worldwide, not only taking into account logistics, but politics and declining grades. In your role as a general director of M&A and ventures at Rio Tinto, what do you think South America have to offer regarding new copper projects, and what about the potential of Argentina in this matter?
I'll start with the last one first, and firstly say I can't obviously show any nationalist bias. All I would say in the context of Argentina and indeed the rest of South America is it has some of the greatest copper endowment on the planet, just, you know, by virtue of its geology. And of course, that's not something you can change. What you can change, of course, is the success of that industry using, in particular, technology, but also attraction as an investment destination. Quite a lot of the challenges we face, not just in Latin America, but also in Africa, for example, is access to infrastructure to facilitate development. And, you know, when I talked about some of the challenges in terms of timelines for development, quite a lot of those are driven by infrastructure considerations. And I'm sure you're very familiar with some of the challenges we have, for example, in the case of projects in remote locations and the need to build infrastructure to facilitate those. So yes, I mean, you know, Latin America obviously has a tremendous endowment of not just copper, but other minerals as well. And, you know, what I would say is that to maintain its position as a very attractive investment destination, it has the geological endowment, it has tremendous capability in terms of skill sets, etc. I think we are always going to be up against the challenge of infrastructure. So, you know, from a governmental support point of view, if there's anything that can be pushed forward in terms of facilitating infrastructure development, it's a huge advantage in terms of attracting mining investment as well.
Thank you, Kevin. And I just want to make sure that, or try to find out whether we have similarities or different views across the panel. Christina and Rod, what are your views on, you know, on the opportunities that the Latin American region can offer to develop new projects? Chris, do you want to offer?
Yeah, hugely prospective, without a doubt. And I don't just say that because I'm half Venezuelan. I mean, for copper, for other for lithium, other whole range of metals and minerals. I think one of the questions was asking about Latin America maybe even reestablishing itself as a worldwide copper producer. Latin America is already absolutely critical to future supplies of copper. I think that there are, I mean, speaking to someone from Lennon from the IADB, I think there are challenges around making sure that institutions are appropriately capacitated to deal with the resources that they have in the right way, and that communities are empowered to know what to expect and to handle the industry in their areas. And as we've been all communicating, the industry needs to take on its responsibility. So those partnerships and those expectations all need to be established. But the huge prospectivity, it just needs to all happen in a way that creates value for the long term.
Lennon, I would maybe answer it just by sharing some interesting and very recently released data that we've collected looking at social progress in countries that are mining dependent across the world over the last 25 years. So we looked back 25 years and said, the countries for whom mining is an important industry, how well have they done in a range of social and economic indicators like the UN Sustainable Development Goals? And are they doing better or worse compared to countries where mining is not so important? Now, you know, there's been a traditional view of a resource curse, the fact that actually when you're dependent on resources, it can hold your development back. What our data shows, and this was released just last week, unequivocally, without doubt out of the data, is that countries who are dependent on mining have achieved faster social progress than those that are not dependent on resources. And within countries, the parts of the country that are dependent on mining achieve faster progress than parts of the country that are not dependent on mining. So lots of really interesting insights in that work for anybody who's interested. You can Google ICMM Social Progress Report and you'll see it. But here's the real interesting bit for Latin America, Lennon, which is when we look at the countries that have made the fastest progress in the last 25 years, Of the 4 or 5, 2 are Latin American, and that's Peru and Bolivia. And if you maybe are looking at the news headlines in the last 3 months, you might think I'm mad for saying that. But look over 25 years, and it's quite clear. By the way, the others are Botswana and Indonesia, for anybody who was interested. But it's clear that Latin American economies are amongst those that have achieved some of the fastest rates of social progress. And the ones that have achieved the fastest rates have been those that are mining dependent. So I thought that was an interesting perspective to share.
Absolutely.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I'm so sorry that I haven't been able to get over all the questions that I have received so far. I think that we have like 2 more minutes to make another question, or maybe 2 if you guys make it quick. One of them is, and I think you guys talk about this, the future of mining also includes automation, and sometimes automations meaning are reducing the labor force participation within the mining industry. That is already a very capital intensive industry sometimes. Where do you think in terms of labor force participation might be the sweet spot for employers in the future? Anyone wants to go with that one?
Lennon, could you just clarify a bit? Excuse me there. What is the thrust of your question?
Yeah, I'm so sorry that I was translating the question in my mind because it was in Spanish. But I think that at the end of the day, the question is about what are going to be the main areas of work within the mining industry. Are we talking that you will require only highly specialized geologists working in the mining industry, or you will probably need as well, I don't know, a bunch of different skill sets that might be required within the mining industry? I'm so sorry that I'm just rephrasing and translating the question at the same time.
Lennon, maybe I'll have a go first. Speaking as a geologist, first thing I'd like to say is I wish I was more successful in discovering ore bodies. It's not easy, and I think there's no doubt about it. We have to become smarter in terms of the skill sets we develop, but also the data we access, integrate, and deploy for success in exploration. But I think more generally, upskilling and development of broader skills right across the workforce is going to be an increasingly important part of the industry going forward. And that's good because it gives people opportunity for development, but also hopefully it attracts more people into the industry, as being as perhaps not as attractive as some other industries. But to my mind, the development of technology, the development of skill sets is got to be a winning formula for younger people to enter into the industry. And I'd certainly like to believe that is a trend that we're moving forward with.
Thank you, Kevin. Chris or Rob, if you want to comment on that, please feel free.
Happy to, and then Christina can have the final word. Just to say that it is very widespread, the need for reskilling and for reshaping jobs. Our estimate is that to deliver the mine of the future will require about half the workforce to be retrained. That's our estimate. About 50% of the workforce will need retraining. By the way, this is not just obviously an issue for our industry because, one estimate is that about 1 billion people globally will need retraining over the next 20 years. So it's going to be a huge challenge for everybody to face. Maybe just highlighting one area where you can imagine a increase in the number of people as well as the skills of people required to deliver the mine of the future would be in the area of social performance. And what we have seen, I think, over the last 15 years or so is a steadily increasing importance of the way that companies engage with communities, both local as well as in the country at a regional level and with international stakeholders. And, I think over the last few years, we have seen quite painfully what happens when that social performance goes bad. And the expectations of society of mining are going to be such that people with the skills of social engagement are going to be much more important and much more required in the industry in the future. So yes, there's lots of interesting work around the kind of geologists and mining engineers and the technical people we're going to need in the future. I think there's going to be a huge amount of people with social skills that we will be needing in the future as well.
Thank you, Rob. Chris?
Agree with that, Rob. Agree with you.
Thank you, Lennon. I mean, a risk of repetition, but I think that, as Rose said, that the transformation that can be referred to as future of work, or sometimes referred to as the fourth industrial revolution, is happening across a full range of sectors. It's not just mining. In mining and at Anglo-American, what we are discovering is that the picture is much more complicated and nuanced than you might assume. We are piloting a system whereby we can very carefully map our skill sets right now and what skills will be needed in the future. We are participating in a range of initiatives. One is the ICMM one that Ro referred to in his presentation, where we can improve our planning in this area. And as we learn, again, there are conclusions that aren't obvious. For example, the example of automated haulage, which was raised in the question, yes, you don't have an operator, but it completely changes the profile of the entire team around the truck. You have different requirements of maintenance teams, different numbers of people. Your life of mine is very often extended. And so then that also changes the jobs profile of the entire equation. And so therefore when I first started working in this area, I kept asking people, what's the simple number? What's the answer? And it turns out it is complex, and perhaps that's an obvious thing to say, but it wasn't obvious to me when I started. So there is a whole range of different roles, different skills. And then one other point is that, as I said in my presentation, there are concerns. Change, of course, will trigger concerns. But there is also great opportunity. So we are finding, for example, that with remote operating centers, with autonomous trucks, it is more possible to have a more diverse workforce. Young people that have different expectations about roles and what they want to do might look for different roles that the mining industry can provide that it hasn't been able to provide traditionally. So the whole picture is going to change. And we need to, and we are strengthening our ability to work with our stakeholders and prepare and make that future a reality.
Thank you, Christina, Kevin, and Rod. I would like to apologize that we couldn't go further and ask you all the questions that all the participants have wrote in the group chat. I would like to apologize to everyone because we are not going to have enough time to go all over them. But then I would like to propose that my colleagues could organize another session, and we can expand in the near future this topic, because this is such an important topic, not only for the region but for the worldwide and the mining industry in general. So Kevin, Rod, Christina, thank you so much for
Thank you.
Here and your presentation. They were great. Last but not least, we have Peter Lynch. Peter, thank you so much for being here today. Peter belongs to the British Chilean Chamber of Commerce. And Peter, thank you so much for being here. The floor is yours. I'm so sorry. You have a few minutes to provide some remarks. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Lennon. And first of all, congratulations to all the presenters, Ro, Kevin, and Christina. It was an outstanding presentations from you. And as Kevin said, the commonality is surprising. As indicated at the beginning, I also work for BHP. So I just try to wrap this up in a minute or a couple of minutes, but just some high-level thoughts. Clearly, society is expecting more from us. So we all know that we will need more copper, for example. Production will double in the next 30 years because that's the demand. But we have to be closer to what society expects. We have to be safer. We need to remain competitive. We need to be sustainable from an environmental point of view, and that came through with climate change. And also we need to create social value. We need to be closer to our communities. In the case of BHP, we're also obviously working on remote working, automation. We recently, a couple of years ago actually, opened our integrated operations center in Santiago, where we manage Escondida and Spence. We've also, perhaps we started before COVID, but obviously that's increased now, increased our flexibility. So that's helped us with our inclusion and diversity efforts. Women already account for 23% of BHP's workforce compared to other industries. So we are making some progress. We are also going for precision mining, collecting data to make things better. Sustainability is another key focus area, and as mentioned in the seminar, water is a big challenge. But again, we have moved away from sourcing our water from natural aquifers to desalination. That has changed. And by 2025, all of our electricity for Escondida and Spence will come from non-conventional renewable resources. So that again is a big change. And we're also working on using to reduce our direct diesel emissions through things like green hydrogen. But then perhaps we need to not forget that social value is paramount to maintain our operations, and we need to increase our contribution to our host regions. We need to work better with our local economies. Training, which again was mentioned in the webinar, is essential. Infrastructure, we also have to contribute to that, and that is key in our industry, as well as recognizing the work and the value of the indigenous communities. So those are just some quick thoughts, but really the seminar has been outstanding, and thank you all for taking part. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Peter, and thanks again, Kevin, Rod, Christina, Liz, all the organizers. This was a fantastic seminar, and I hope the organizers can take advantage that we already have a lot of questions that couldn't be answered, so we can organize another one in the near future with a terrific panel like this one, please. Last but not least, I would like to thank, we have two amazing translators today. I couldn't mention that, but both Pilar and Pilar. Thank you so much for your work. I know that for many people it was extremely useful. So without anything else, thanks a lot and have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.